So yesterday we had a session which had a similar title, and that was Bhagavad Gita, a manual for rightful living in this world. So I thought maybe since we have a session today and we had decided that it will be based on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, then why not say that have a similar topic, that is the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, a manual for rightful living. As we discussed yesterday, Bhagavad Gita, after every chapter, there are 18 chapters, So after every chapter, Sri Krishna says, there is a small verse which says that this is an Upanishad, this is a Yoga Shastra also. It is not just a Upanishad. Upanishad means that which gives us knowledge of Vedanta, knowledge of the Vedas. It's not only a Upanishad, but Bhagavad Gita is not only a Upanishad, but it is also a Yoga Shastra. The difference between Upanishads and a Yoga Shastra is Yoga is applied Vedanta. When you try to apply the scientific principles, any scientific principle which can be termed as a theory, we have what is known as technology. If we want to make use of the scientific principles and apply to our day-to-day life, then we call it technology. Only when science becomes technology, it becomes very useful or tangible to human beings. So also, Bhagavad Gita, though it is an Upanishad, it contains some of the finest gems from the Vedas, like a garland. It has taken some selected ideas, the most important ideas from all the essence of the Vedas, which are also known as the Upanishads. But at the same time, it is also a Yoga Shastra. Why I am giving you this background is, when we approach any book which helps us to practice, when we say rightful living, means we are living, everybody is living. Somehow we are existing. We can't say we are living, we are existing, just as many things in Prakriti exist. So many things exist. We have the plant life, slowly it gets evolved into animal life. That is what Darwin's theory says, that evolution is always taking place. So when a human being or when living beings find that their bodies or their physical bodies, their minds and whatever equipment they have, we call it a psychophysical organism, because every organism has a physical body, sthula sharira, and a psychic part, that is the mental body or subtle body. And behind that is the cause behind the psychophysical organism. There is a third body which is also known as causal body. That is the samskara which decides which body we have in this life. So if we don't have a body, which is just as we change cars, the model doesn't serve our purpose, we buy a higher model of a car. So also human beings, according to Darwin, when it finds that this body is not able to express, survival becomes very difficult. So naturally the organism evolves. It gets a better physical body, a better equipment to deal with the surroundings around it. That is why when Swamiji was asked what is life by the Mysore Maharaja, this is applicable for all living beings. So he gave a wonderful definition of life. When we say right living, what do you mean by living? What is life? That is the first question. And the Mysore Maharaja asked Swamiji, what is life? Because we are living a life without knowing what its purpose is. So Swamiji gave a very nice definition, the simplest definition I have ever come across as to what is life. He said life is an unfoldment of a being under circumstances that are trying to press it down. This is one of the best definitions. I'll tell you why. It is an unfoldment of a being. Every being tries to unfold its inner potential, the inner possibilities. That is why we have our Saturday class, which has the heading Vedanta and the Science of Human Possibilities. So when we live, we have to live in such a way that we express all the possibilities that are possible within the limitations of this physical, mental and causal body which we have. So when Darwin says a body evolves, he is more or less talking of the two levels of the body, physical and the mental. He doesn't talk about spiritual evolution. Because for most of the creatures, most of the beings, for them survival is the main instinct, the survival instinct. So that body which is the fittest survives more. And to survive, the body has to evolve. But when we come to the human beings, that is why Sri Ramakrishna, when he was asked in the gospel, what is the purpose of life? Purpose of life, if you ask an animal, of course the animal cannot speak, but if at all we ask, they will say survival. What else? We have to survive. We are born, we are going to die, we have to survive as long as possible. And for that we keep on evolving. We get better and better bodies. So, for Darwin, survival was the only motive why a human or why a animal or any being evolves. When it finds survival very difficult, it tries to get a better body. That is how our idea of transmigration. So, Sri Ramakrishna in his gospel, we can say that this is also a manual of rightful living, because Sri Ramakrishna asked this fundamental question and he answered also. What is the goal of life? Why do we live? He says, having got this human birth, if we do not realize God in this very birth, and if we do not explore the possibility of how we will realize God or realize the Spirit or Brahman, or we call it by any other name, Purusha. So if we do not realize it in this very life, then our life is, according to him and according to all the spiritual masters of the world, it is a utter waste. So Sri Ramakrishna speaks of a higher evolution than what Darwin speaks of. Darwin speaks of survival instinct, that we have to somehow survive. The longer we survive, the better evolved that organism is. That is what he believes. So this desire to survive makes an animal take up better and better bodies. That is perfectly in accordance with the theory of karma. So according to the Buddhists, according to the Hindus and according to the Jains who believe in the theory of karma and rebirth, the soul gives up different bodies and wants to be born in better and better bodies. That is why in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna is answering Arjuna. Arjuna asks, I know the goal of life is to realize that Brahman, realize that spirituality, manifest that divinity within. Suppose in the process I die, what happens? So there is proof of rebirth when Sri Krishna says, don't worry, you will be born in a family of yogis. Means you will continue your yoga. Whatever you had left incomplete in this life, circumstances will give you an opportunity to complete it in the next life. So a human being will evolve continuously according to the gospel till it realizes in some birth that God realization is the only goal of human life. So according to the gospel, also according to the Gita, according to any other scripture, the goal of human life, all the human possibilities that we are trying to explore, is to realize the divinity within or realize God. In simple words, our full life will be fulfilled. We would have lived rightly if we reach that goal in this life itself, in this very life itself. So that is the essence of the gospel. So we are now going to look upon this gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, which is the essence of, according to Swami Sarvasthananda and according to all of us, is the essence of the scriptural truths of all religions of the world, or all religions or religious sects within Hinduism and outside of Hinduism also. Because you will see every line speaks of this highest evolution. So, if it speaks of the highest evolution, it also has to speak about rightful living. So in Gita, yesterday I mentioned that though it is a Upanishad, it is a Yoga Shastra, still Sri Krishna is teaching Arjuna the art of rightful living. Because many times when Sri Krishna tells Arjuna the ideal, he says, what you say is true, but I cannot reach that level right now. Or maybe it looks to me to be an impossible ideal. So what is the solution for that? So he gives a more practical solution, because we see in the second chapter, after the purpose, goal and purpose of life is explained in the Sankhya Yoga, the second chapter, as Sri Ramakrishna will also do. Many times he will tell you the highest philosophy, but then the devotees who are there, the people who have assembled there, they will find this ideal too difficult, because they cannot give up their attachment to the world. So they will ask a question, we people who are in the world, Amadir Upai ki, what is the, everybody asks. So at his level, Sri Ramakrishna will give instructions so that it can be practiced by a person in a particular situation. That doesn't mean Sri Ramakrishna is diluting the ideal, as Sri Krishna also does not dilute the ideal. In fact, when Arjuna hears the highest ideal, he is shocked. He said, if you are telling me this is what one should do, and I believe in you because you are my friend, philosopher and guide, if what you say is true, then why am I fighting this war? I should be going to the forest and trying to realize the highest ideal. So Sri Krishna tells him why he should be fighting this war. Then he comes to the concept of Swadharma. So there is a dharma, there are different levels of truth that a human being in his lifetime tries to attain. All are truths, but one is a lower truth, another is a higher truth. So just as in the Gita, Sri Ramakrishna also, depending on the needs of the people and also depending on the capacity. One is the need, another is the capacity. Somebody may be needing, everybody needs the highest wisdom in his life, in his or her life. But unfortunately doesn't have the capacity. So one has to outgrow one's limitations, physical, mental and also causal or spiritual, and make oneself fit for a higher life. So just as Arjuna was told that now you fight with as much detachment as possible, but keep in mind the highest ideal. So someday when you will be fit, you will realize it. That's why we find in all the 18 chapters, each one of the chapter is a manual for rightful living. If we buy even a small gadget, leave alone human life, which is very precious than any other gadget that we use. Every gadget comes with a manual. If we want the full functions of that gadget to be utilized, then we have to very carefully read the manual. Otherwise, you may use the gadget that you have for a very elementary purpose. Most of our people, when they use mobile phones, they use it for calling. If it is just for calling, then any phone will do. Why do we need smartphones? Because it can do many things. It has many more possibilities, but we don't explore fully. We pay more money because we think that we will be using. Similarly, when God has given us this body, He has also given us a manual. And there are different manuals, different religions have different manuals. Whichever language one understands, whichever culture one is born into, he follows his own manual. All manuals are more or less correct. Correct in the sense they teach the same truth. Though depending on the different models, the pathways to realize that highest functionality, our human being, our bodies, our minds, our spirits, they are all highly functional things. Functional means it can do many functions. For an intellectual or academic career, we say that you have to develop your intellectual skills, academic skills. So many skills we speak of. Comprehension skills, we have analytical skills. There are so many intelligences, different types of intelligences. So much of study has been done, especially when you come to the field of education. We say that there are so many faculties a human being has. His emotional faculty, that has to be developed. His mental faculty, analytical faculty. A complete being would be one who has developed all his intellectual capacities to the fullest. But even that we don't do. But Sri Ramakrishna in the Gospel is talking of not these possibilities. He is speaking of the possibility that will solve our problems forever, which will teach us rightful living. Other subjects or other subjects that we normally study to earn a living will definitely help us to earn a living. The better we develop our skills, the more we learn. But at the same time, they don't guarantee that we have learned the art of living in harmony with nature, in harmony with Prakriti, so that we use the forces of Prakriti to our advantage. You see, you have to remember one thing. Thakur used to always say, Shakti has two aspects, or Maya has two aspects. One is a Vidya Maya, another is a Avidya Maya. The same Shakti which leads us to destruction, in its destructive aspect, that Shakti, if it is positively used, if you see it positively used, it can lead to liberation, it can lead to higher things. So that is why Thakur used to say, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, in the Gospel, many times he will say, even in the Vaishnava scriptures, they say, without the grace of Radha, one cannot realize Krishna. The idea is, when you say Radha, she is not just a feminine being. It's not just because she is feminine. The feminine aspect of reality is known as Prakriti or Shakti or Maya in Vedanta. Vedanta calls it Maya, but that Maya also has a very big role to play in our life. We can't ignore it. To revive that Shakti, Sri Ramakrishna came and he gave a very beautiful concept that just as we have a Avidya Shakti which leads us to destruction, the same Shakti will help you come out of the problems. It can help you solve the problems and solve your problems permanently. It can give mukti also. That is why that famous song which Thakur liked, Sakali Tomar Ichha, Ichha Mai Tara Tumi, Tumar Karma Tumi Koroma, Loke Bole Ami Kori. By due to our ego, we think we are doing. But if we allow her to do, and if we understand, because we think we understand, we know what rightful living is, but we really don't know. So it is under the guidance of this Vidya Maya or the Divine Mother. Now we are celebrating Navratri. That is the essence of Shakti Puja, which Sri Ramakrishna came to revive. His idea of Shakti is not just worshipping a female goddess, Ma Kali or some other goddess in feminine form. They are just symbolic. What Shakti really means is the different forces of nature, whom we call Prakriti, we give it a feminine, we call it is a feminine power. And that which is neutral is not exactly masculine, but it is a neutral power, that is Brahman. That is why Brahman you can't say he, or the Purusha, we don't say, though Purusha and Prakriti, if we say Purusha is a he, but strictly speaking it is termed as it, Brahman. Brahman is never, we don't say he is Brahman. It's not a masculine quality. Whether it is masculine or feminine, anything that is part of creation is part of Prakriti, is part of Shakti. But Sri Ramakrishna in his Gospel, he spoke of the lack of differentiation between Shakti and Shiva, Purusha and Prakriti. Shiva or Shakti Abhed, Brahma or you can say Brahma Shakti Abhed. The purely conscious principle, which is eternal, which Vedas, Vedanta, Upanishads say, which does not change, and the always changing principle, which is Prakriti, it changes because of the three gunas. Prakriti is made of three gunas. If you say there are these three forces, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, it's a very interesting concept. If you see at the microcosmic level and the macrocosmic universal level, the same principles are working. In some part of the universe, those who know physics, they know that creation is going on. They say the universe began with a Big Bang. And the Big Bang, the ever expanding universe, there are so many nice theories. There is a lot of truth in them, that the universe appears to be expanding in some places, whereas in some places, which was discovered by many of the scientists in the cosmic level, they find there are these black holes where the creation collapses. So this collapsing power is known as the power of tamas. So in the universe, at some place, there are so many multiverses. You should not say universe. Nowadays they use the word multiverses. So these multiverses, in some place, the universe is collapsing into black holes. In some places it is expanding. The suns, the moons, the planets, the stars, they are coming out of, as if they are coming out of nothing. We call it Srishti, Sthiti and Pralaya. That is what Vedanta says. That is how Indian philosophy describes it. So these three principles, one is expansion, going away from the center. Another is collapsing, that is going towards the center, centripetal and centrifugal force. And a third force which balances. A force that balances the centrifugal, that keeps the world order. In Vedanta it is known as rhythm, the cosmic order. You see, our Vedas have described all these things which completely fit the theory of universe as it is explained, as scientists are trying to explain. They are trying to explain the microcosm, they are trying to explain the macrocosm, how the universe is created. Is there a single universe or a multiverse where some place it collapses, some place it expands. All these things are explained by a very simple principle known as gunas. Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Sattva is the balancing principle. If you read Swamiji's Raj Yoga, he describes, when he describes Sankhya, he very clearly says, there is one principle which is tamasic, which leads, if you see an inert object which does not move, which has collapsed, which has no life apparently, there is another thing which expands. And to balance them, there is this sattvic guna or sattvic principle. When you apply it to human beings, we say a person who is not exploring his human possibility, who is very dull, who is just living an animal life, is more of tamas. Though there is a little rajas, otherwise he will not eat, he will not do anything. But a highly rajasic person like Arjuna, he was full of rajoguna. So his nature, swadharma, was to fight and establish dharma. So every human being, before we decide how do we lead a rightful, how does rightful living apply to us? For Arjuna, what was rightful living? For some other disciple of Krishna, Uddhava for example, who was full of sattva, he said, no, you just leave this world and you go to the Himalayas. There's this whole Uddhava Gita. We have Bhagavad Gita for Arjuna or people who are living and fighting their battles of the world. But for people like Uddhava, who was full of sattva, Sri Krishna doesn't tell him to fight or doesn't tell him to get involved in the world. He says, go to Badrikashram. That is the way of contemplation. You are already sattvic. So when Arjuna tries to imitate or says that why can't I also go instead of killing all these people? I also need to go and meditate. Why are you giving some different advice to different people? The reason is that rightful living for a person depends on his gunas. The combination of three gunas which determine his swadharma or dharma. So dharma means how rightful living actually means dharma. I didn't use the word dharma because rightful living makes more sense to us. Dharma, if you say, people think dharma means religion. Dharma means so many things to so many people. But rightful living is a more popular word. The art of living, rightful living. So everybody knows we have to live. But how to live? How to rightfully live a life of fulfillment, a life of meaning, a life of purpose within our limitations. You have to remember that. Each one has his own capacities depending on the proportion of gunas, how much of tamas, how much of rajas, how much of sattva is there. Depending on that, his swadharma is decided. In fact, the four varna and varnashrama, the varna is decided whether you are a Brahmin or a Kshatriya or a Shudra or a Vaishya is not determined by your birth. One may be born in a Brahmin family, but if he has full of rajas and he joins, say, an army or maybe he becomes a Kshatriya, he becomes a Kshatriya, though he is born of Brahmin parents. So, depending on the gunas, the preponderance of the gunas that of the three gunas of Prakriti, the dharma is determined. And rightful living means follow your swadharma, which may not be somebody else's swadharma. So, the gospel is such a valuable book. All sorts of people come to Sri Ramakrishna. There are people who are immersed in the world, there are people who are like Narayan and all the monastic disciples. Sri Ramakrishna speaks something different to them. In fact, most of the times when you find some people coming, he would tell these disciples to go away. You will never find all together. He was so shrewd that he knew the capacity of the learner. He could read the person's mind. He could find immediately by looking at a person what his swadharma is. And he would give the exact advice for rightful living for a person at his stage of development. That is why Sri Ramakrishna is known as a unique teacher. When we say Sri Ramakrishna, the great master, without reading which we cannot understand the gospel, we find so many different types of advices in the gospel. So if we want to understand the manual for right living, we have to understand that inside the manual itself, there are certain instructions for different models. Each of the human beings, you can say, are different models. Like we have one gadget, but they have different models. So many times you can't apply universal law to everybody. So Sri Ramakrishna speaks to the individual devotees or the people who have come to him throughout the gospel. If you see, each conversation is unique. So that's why we have to understand the message of the gospel, taking into consideration the context and the capacity of the individual to whom it is addressed. So Sri Ramakrishna, like a wonderful mother, she knows different children have different appetites. The young baby will not eat the same thing which a grown-up child will eat. So the mother cooks different things. Sri Ramakrishna used to give this example. Shankaracharya and all, they call this as Adhikari Bheda. So for them, they decide who should be capable of listening to these messages. All are not qualified. They will say that, do you have this qualification? Are you a Adhikari? Are you fit to learn these things? Then you come. It's like passing one exam after another, and when you are capable of understanding things in a better way, you are promoted to the higher class. So this gradation of Swadharma you will find everywhere, not only in the Bhagavad Gita, but also in the Gospel. So they have a special place in our life, and the Gospel has to be read in conjunction or with the help of the great master or the divine play of Sri Ramakrishna, which is such an important book that without understanding the life and message, how Sri Ramakrishna used to deal with his disciples, how he gave different advices to different people at different stages of life, and for each one that was the best message. So it's like one teacher for all the different classes. The teacher was so unique that he could teach class 1 student and a PhD student also. He will not say the same thing in a PhD or in a master's class and say the same thing whatever he says in the master's class. He won't speak the same thing to a kindergarten boy or girl. So here, the different spiritual disciplines which enable us, spiritual disciplines, by spiritual disciplines they mean techniques for rightful living. These different techniques, when you say spiritual disciplines, we actually mean the techniques for rightful living, which are explained in the Gospel. So as Sri Krishna advises Arjuna, in fact if you see all the 18 chapters, you will find that many of the things are not relevant for Arjuna at his stage of his life. So that is why in the 3rd chapter he asks, you are confusing me. On one side you say this is the ideal, another side you says you tell me once for all what I should do at my stage of life. What do you think? I am coming to you because I am helpless. I want to know the right way to live, right way to act. In fact, the 1st chapter itself is so important in the Bhagavad Gita, that vishada, that confusion which we face every moment of our life. Don't think it is just a one-off incident which happened in the battlefield of Mahabharata. This delusion or this confusion was there, or not only for Arjuna and all the other people, the characters of the Mahabharata, but even today, everyone faces this problem of choosing the right thing. When you say right living, it just boils down to this fact that do we make the right choice at the right time? and that requires a lot of skill. So in this case, we go to the Gospel, and if we read the Gospel daily, as many of our devotees they do, because most of our senior monks, they used to say, every devotee or every person comes with his individual problems for counseling. So when you don't know what to do, then most of the people are referred to the Gospel. If you want to solve all the problems of life, read the Gospel. It appears to be a very simplistic advice, but it is a really prudent and wise advice that there is a solution for every type of problem. As we find in the Bhagavad Gita, it was addressed to Arjuna, but not all the problems that are addressed in the Bhagavad Gita were addressed to Arjuna alone. It was through Arjuna, it was meant for other people. And finally, in the 18th chapter, if you see, Sri Krishna very clearly tells, I have told you so many things. Now you wisely evaluate all the things that I have told and do as you deem fit. Whatever you think is fit, you do. Don't do because I said this. I am giving you all the options. The choice you have to make. But I have told you what is dharma, what is adharma, what is rightful living. All the 14th chapter, if you see the gunas and everything. So also Sri Ramakrishna, there is not a single problem that he has left unaddressed. When people come, he knows exactly what ails them. So, we'll find the most important thing about gospel is, Bhagavad Gita also is having a similar characteristic. You can take any chapter. It appears to be a loose gathering of different shlokas, though many scholars try to interpret, and Sri Krishna himself has given the name Sankhya Yoga, Karma Yoga, Karma Sannyasa Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. So apparently one chapter deals with a particular theme. But we will find in each of the chapters you will find some elements of jnana, some elements of karma for active people, some elements of bhakti for devotional minded people, emotional people. So also Sri Ramakrishna tries to explain the same thing, but the distinction between Bhagavad Gita and this gospel is, here he comes down to the level of a normal human being who is involved in his day-to-day problems. And he uses the most common examples, most common expressions, or the most common parables, or not parables, he gives similes from day-to-day happenings which everybody sees or encounters in his or her daily life. He knows many of the things are not very relevant today because the society of those days, a rural setting, of course he lived in Calcutta, but still he was very rustic. He apparently did not have any university education. But at the same time he was full of wisdom because he was very sharp and he could understand things. He studied the book of life. For somebody to guide us how to indulge or how to live rightfully, to know what right living is, one should live rightly oneself. So here in the gospel you will find everything that he tells is based on his own life, where you will see the demonstration of what exactly he is saying. There is no discrepancy between the two. That is why his message becomes very powerful. As Gandhiji used to say that my life is my message, what he meant was my life should be my message. So if my message reflects or is reflected in the life that I live, then it gets more authenticity. So the authentic life, they are expressed in taking into consideration examples that are happening, that happen almost every day. Though most of the examples that he gave are from rural Bengal, where he enacted his divine play. But still, most of the things we encounter in our day-to-day life, the behavior of different types of people, the behavior of different, even some of the animals, different natures of different characteristics of different people, which he used as very powerful examples to explain, and behavior of different people in different circumstances, how they funnily behave or how they make mistakes. So he gives these graphic examples so that people can relate to the philosophy behind that message to a living example in somebody else's life. So when somebody asked whether Sri Ramakrishna, because he did not go to the university, was he considered to be educated? But his education was a daily education. Every day he was so sharp and his mind was so concentrated that nothing would escape his attention. You all know, once he never liked carelessness. If you read, that's why I say that Sri Ma or Master Masha is so nicely observed. He was also a great observer. That is why Sri Ramakrishna chose him to write the gospel, to record the gospel. His observation was quite similar to his master's. Nothing escaped his attention. How people behaved, how they reacted, who laughed, and what were the jokes that Sri Ramakrishna told, and why did he tell them. Then he will, in his own mind, he'll say, oh, was Sri Ramakrishna referring to this? Did he mean this? Was he trying to point this? So it's like an analysis, it's like a continuous learning which took place. And his life, if you see all the incidents of his life, and also the Holy Mother and Swamiji and all the great people, they undergo all these struggles. They undergo all the problems of life similar to ours. They can easily avoid that. They were incarnations, they were great spiritual people. But they want to show that how in similar circumstances they face the problems of life which may come to us. He suffered like any other person from a very serious disease. So maybe people who have a similar kind of disease or any incurable disease, how he can handle his own life. So we get a teaching, get a message by his live example. How he behaved when he himself suffered. How he behaved when he was tempted, when somebody tried to give him money. How he behaved when people criticized him. How he lived when there were so many temptations around him. So every one of his actions, as it were, gave a lot of credibility to the message that he delivered. Most of our messages, they don't create any impact because it doesn't have a credibility. Whereas Sri Ramakrishna, as he used to tell in Bengali, man mukh ek kara, how to make the thought, word and action one. It seems to be very simple, but it is one of the most difficult things. One has to be absolutely egoless to do that. You see, these characteristics are seen in children. Even Sri Ramakrishna mentioned this. A Paramahamsa always keeps small children with them. They just like to interact with children. Why he said this? Not because children are, the fact is that children have not yet developed that ego. That ego which colors our choices, which colors our decisions, which colors our life, colors our behavior towards others. Children don't have. That's why they have less problems. They may fight, they may quarrel, small children, but they will make up very quickly. Whereas when we grow up, our egos become so big, or egos assume such proportions that we are not ready to let it go. Then the quarrel lasts for a very long time. But if you see Sri Ramakrishna's life, his behavior, if you see how M has recorded in the Gospel, how beautifully he says, many times he has referred to this, that he is behaving as if he is a 5-year-old child. Though he was such a wise person, the guru of so many householders and also monks, would-be monks, but his behavior, because in children or in innocent people whose egos are not developed, they cannot but have their actions, thoughts and words, they will not differ. Whatever they say, if the child is not taught to hide his feelings, or not taught, very, very young children, you can't make them speak lies. If you have seen how difficult it is to tell a child to keep a secret, you have observed this. You tell a child, he will just tell everything, because he doesn't know the consequences. He doesn't have that sense of ego, that if I tell this, this will happen. You know that word which very often they use in Bengali, in Hindi, chalaki. Chalaki is not there in the children. That is why Sri Ramakrishna used to say that if we want to know what right living is, we have to learn from the examples of these small children. By small children, I am not talking of the immaturity that they have, but the innocence or the straightforwardness, the capacity that they have, where they make their words, thought and deeds one. So that is the goal of life. And when we come to this Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you will find there are hundreds and hundreds of examples where the techniques of right living are not only spoken of but lived by Sri Ramakrishna himself. One small example I can give you. Latu Maharaj, who used to, Swami Adbhutananda, who was, as a young man, or a young youth, Sri Ramakrishna wanted somebody to serve him, because he was getting older and he was very sick. So Ramchandra Datta agreed to loan him. He said, okay, you can keep this child. Mainly, not child, this young boy. Mainly Sri Ramakrishna was attracted by his sincerity, his guilelessness, his spiritual capacity. The spiritual possibilities that he had was recognized by Sri Ramakrishna. As we say, he knew who are the adhikaris, who are the people who have the capacity. So, Latu Maharaj was serving Sri Ramakrishna. And you see how he taught by example. Very, very often, there was a stage in Sri Ramakrishna's life where he could not touch metal, because the very touch of metal would sting him like a scorpion stings. So somebody had to take the lota for him, and even to wash his hands somebody will pour, or he used to use a mud lota, or even the stone plates which we see in the museum. Sri Ramakrishna never used metal plates. Stone plates were made for him. Stone plates. He used to eat in black stone plates. So this Latu Maharaj was supposed to take all his things, and that included, his things were very simple. Whenever he went somewhere to some guest, he used to take his own lota and take some towel for wiping. He was so particular that he saw to it that everything was taken. He was so systematic in his. That's how Master Mahasaya and even Holy Mother learned the art of rightful living by actual demonstration. Sri Ramakrishna actually demonstrated. So you'll find many such incidents in the Gospel and also in some of the other reminiscences like Srimad Darshan, the 16 volume Bengali book which has been translated into English and Hindi. There also you will find so many incidents which are not found in the Gospel. So there, Master Masha observed that Sri Ramakrishna and Great Master also mentions this. Once he forgot the towel, and then he forgot to take the towel or he forgot to bring the towel. Then he was very upset. He said, now you go back and get the towel. What will people think after reaching that place, the guest place? If I ask for a towel, how bad it will look. These are very small incidents. But you see how much focused he was on the small things of life. Even though there was no water shortage, M says in there is a book, How to Live with God. There is a beautiful book where some of the reminiscences of M, in M's chapter, you will find that he says that Sri Ramakrishna taught us how to use less water to wash the dishes. Not because we have more water, that doesn't mean we have to waste it. Similarly, also trained Holy Mother when she went to Kamarpukur before coming to Dakshineshwar, how to run an household, how to use less oil, not waste things. All these things, they form part of rightful living. Just as in the Gita, we will find that Sri Krishna sometimes will talk the highest philosophy, the second chapter, Sankhya Yoga. But again Arjuna will ask him, he said, you just told about Sthita Prajna, but tell me, how does a Sthita Prajna live, how does he talk, how does he walk? That means the highest ideals, when they are manifest or when they are practiced by sadhakas or people, they exhibit certain characteristics, and that is the art of rightful living which we see in the Gospel. So it is not just a dry and empty or maybe dry philosophy that we come across, but a very, very living philosophy lived by Sri Ramakrishna, lived by his disciples according to their capacity, because you will find so many different types of people coming with so many different attitudes, different capacities. And for each of them, depending on his capacity, how much of capacity he had to follow these teachings, Sri Ramakrishna would tone down his teaching. Not that he would tell that which is untrue. He never spoke an untruth in his life. But we can say we start from a lower truth to a higher truth. Many times we will find that some of the disciples, when they express their inability to perform certain things, he said, what else can you do? You do it. That doesn't mean he is supporting that, but he says if you say you cannot do it, bear the consequences, and then when you are more in control of yourself, you will come to these higher things. So, this gospel, if you see, the gospel is universal in scope. It doesn't, any person belonging to any sect, any religion, that is why it immediately attracts people, irrespective of the religion or sect that they belong to. So many people used to come to Dakshineshwar. So many people of so many varying tastes, so many different faiths. Brahmos came. Keshav Chandra Sen, who was dead against idolatry, or the whole Brahmo cult, where they denounced idolatry. In fact, they would not go to the temple when Naren and others went, Brahmananji also, Rakhal, they didn't go to the temple. But still, what was that which attracted them? They came, Keshav also came, Brahmos came, Vaishnavas came. Perhaps they were fighting with each other, and in some places we'll find Vijay Krishna Goswami had started a separate sect of Brahmo when they differed over certain issues. We find both of them sitting together Though they were enemies, perhaps outside they would not even see each other's faces. But here you will find they were sitting together trying to get something. Because everybody knew that if we want to learn how to live in a rightful way, they knew there is something wrong with us which makes us not adjust to the situations, to people around us. But here is a person who is not only attracting people of different faiths but quite opposite faiths. They come together, they get whatever they have to get from his messages, from his advices, and so whatever be the qualification, whether one is fit or not, he had a kind word or kind message in the science of rightful living for everybody. That is exactly what Sri Krishna does in the Bhagavad Gita also. We will find that as we discuss all the 18 chapters, there are some chapters which deal with this gunas, as I told you. So the different gunas, the different types of foods, the different types of behavior, the different characteristics of certain people, the many things that differ because of the difference in gunas, the combinations of gunas in a particular person, and how such people behave. So it is not just the Sankhya Yoga or the Jnana portion of Bhagavad Gita or the Bhakti portion, the highest philosophy which leads to the highest realization, but it's a very comprehensive manual on the art of living a rightful life. So first now we'll come, how does Sri Ramakrishna classify human beings? That is the first topic. So he classifies, he calls them sadhakas, spiritual aspirants. All human beings, in fact. Everybody is a sadhaka. Some people learn late, some people learn after Vishada, as Arjuna did, when there is depression, anxiety, worries, and life is not going smoothly, then we want a solution. So there are these 4 types of jivas, he says: baddha, bound; the struggling, that is mumukshu; liberated, the mukta; and the ever perfect, nitya siddha. So he has divided human beings also in these categories. There were nitya siddhas like Swami Vivekananda and others who were born perfect. They had a particular role to play, they came. There were the struggling or the mumukshus who were trying to struggle. They knew that we are in bondage, we want to get rid of it. Of course, he gave some wonderful examples of the fish. Some fish trying to come out of the net, some fish trying to be very happy. They are not bothered that there is a net covering them. They are happy with the bondage. So that is the baddha, bound. So we may feel that he has no advice to give to the bound people. No, even for them there is some kind of advice. But for the struggling, most of the people who read the gospel or who are forced to read the gospel come in the second category. A baddha jiva will definitely not bother about even touching the gospel. You give it, he will just reject it. We at least expect people to be people who come to the second mumukshu, the struggling people. And similarly, according to Vaishnavas, the same category is again, he tries to explain to the Vaishnavas who used to come to him, the pravartaka, the sadhaka, the siddha, and the siddha of siddha, that is something similar to nitya mukta. So, liberated and ever free, these are very, very rare people. So, most of the gospel, though Sri Ramakrishna himself gives the characteristics of such people, and Great Master, which is a biography of Sri Ramakrishna, explains all the siddhas or the Jivan Mukta, Nitya Muktas, the Ishwar Kotis, and also Sri Ramakrishna himself, Holy Mother and others, in the Great Master, trying to explain their characteristics as explained in the scriptures. We have this Gauri Pandit, Vaishnava Charan, so many people, and Sri Ramakrishna, like a child, would tell Mathur Babu, please call them, just ask them why this is happening to me. This is not for himself, but he wanted the world to see in the laboratory of spirituality how testing is done, so that experts in that particular field can come and give their opinion, what the scriptures say. So all these manuals of rightful living are scattered. In Hinduism we have many manuals. We have Bhagavad Gita, we have the Upanishads, we have the Bible, we have so many other religions also. Everybody has a manual. But how do we apply it to our day-to-day life? That is the challenge. And the gospel gives us all these wonderful hints for rightful living at the stage we are in the most appropriate manner, so that people can practice the mumukshus, the second category, the struggling or the mumukshus. They are the ones who really will benefit the most, because the Nitya Muktas don't need to read the gospel, they are already free. But still, why do the Nitya Muktas or the ever free people who came, they themselves showed struggle in their life. The Avatara himself shows struggle. Avatarana means that we come down a certain level and show our helplessness, so that by seeing the example of an Avatara, the normal people learn the art of rightful living. It is like they condescend, they come down. Avatarana means coming down from a high state. So Jivan Muktas and Nitya Muktas, they don't need to struggle, but they show the divine Leela or the divine play of such people, the two categories. They are just there to show a struggling soul how to encounter life, how to live rightly in this world and reach the goal of life. Whereas the message, a majority of the messages are for the second category, which is known as the mumukshus, because they are like Arjuna in the first chapter. He is not very clear, not that he wants to run away from the war. Should I or should I not fight? As the famous Shakespeare also said, to be or not to be. That was the confusion he had. If life is better to be, Hamlet asks, to be or not to be. That's the famous quote of Shakespeare. If life is good, is life a better choice or death? But he is not sure, because after death what will happen he doesn't know. So people are not sure. He is not sure to not to be is a good option or choice, or to be is a good choice. That is the confusion which is facing every human being in the first chapter especially, and also Nachiketa in Kathopanishad, where the mystery of death and the mystery of life, you cannot have the mystery, solve the mystery of life without understanding the mystery of death. So only through the great books like the Gospel and the Gita and the Upanishads, we get how to live rightly. As one of the, I'll conclude with this. Swami Vivekananda was one asked, your philosophy is very negative, you always talk of death and what happens after that. Why don't you just bother yourself with how to live? So Swami Vivekananda said, as a logician would say, he says, if you don't know how to die, how can you know how to live? What he meant was, since death is as sure as birth, nobody who is born who can imagine that he will not die unless he becomes realized or he becomes immortal. But all others have to face, just as birth is a certainty, once he is born, death is also equally, it is also true that one will die. So trying to solve the problem of right living, how to live rightly, we have to take into consideration how to die rightly. So how to prepare oneself with death, not die rightly, that means it may mean suicide also. It's not that. So Swami Vivekananda said, our religion teaches us not only how to live properly, rightful living, but live such a life that we die properly. So the art of living is not the only thing that is to be learned. Art of living implies the art of dying. This is the message even of the Bhagavad Gita. Why was why was Arjuna having a problem? Because suddenly he saw that I'll have to kill all these people. Death was a problem, not how to live. Till then he was trying to fight for Swadharma, trying to gather his army and how to live. But suddenly when he saw these are the people who will die tomorrow, that this battlefield will be full of death. So he didn't know how to solve this problem of death. So rightful living, and in the gospel we'll see so many beautiful examples. Sri Ramakrishna's parables are so beautiful. That lady who lost her husband, the doctor came and told that lady, do you want to see how they will react after your death? You think your wife and your children and your parents are loving you so much. I will give you a medicine which will make you appear as if you are dead and see how they behave. You will hear everything, but they will think you are dead. And once that happened, he hears his own wife. They were more concerned about the door and their future than the dead person. So he lost all delusion. Sri Ramakrishna gives that wonderful example. I don't know where he got these stories from. But if you see the gospel has such wonderful stories, so many hints not only on how to live but also how to prepare oneself for death. We will find some people who had just lost their son and others, they came to Sri Ramakrishna, and how Sri Ramakrishna dealt with them, how he consoled them, how he sent them away with full of confidence, full of hope, faith. They had come in a very depressed state. So this whole gospel in our subsequent classes, whenever I get an opportunity to come, we will discuss this gospel from this point of view. How does the gospel help us to engage ourselves in right living? So we'll conclude. This time is almost 4. Huh? Yeah. Fortunately, my train is at 5:30, so we have a little more time. I thought if it is 5, then we have to leave now. So anyway, if there are some questions, you can ask. Yeah, 1 or 2.
Would you like some glass of water?
No, I'll take that.
I'll get a glass.
No, it's fine. No, it's okay. Okay.